Hey everyone, it's another tactics episode for the 2 Plus podcast. I'm Alex and I want to talk with you today about vortexes and how much better remains in play spells have gotten in Old World 1.5. Before 1.5, in the initial version of Old World, vortexes were pretty much a joke. You had Pillar of Fire in one sense that with its ability to move in the direction you wanted and deal damage to units was extreme, leading downstream errata for units like Sisters of the Thorn to prevent it from being used in multiples, which still didn't stop people from really trying to use Lore Familiar to get Pillar of Fire and Fireball to have, I guess, what we call blaster mages running around on the outside, or even just running multiple level fours, sometimes up to three in armies like Empire, with the hope that you could roll up Pillar of Fire for each of them. Underneath that, sometimes you would see vortexes like Crystal Column, which I'll show later on, I think is even improved greatly. And the Tempest for High Elves, High Magic, I suppose, if you're Lizardmen as well, or Wood Elves, you could play. But you see those, they were good because they stay in one spot. But even then, they weren't really game-winning spells. I think vortexes have gotten a lot better for one very big reason, and that's that with the casting or the dispel cost being reduced from +3 or +4 to +1 or +2 across the board, even with some magic items out there, it's very hard to dispel the vortex, even though you're able to now dispel it from the vortex, measure from the vortex itself, so you can't just throw out a vortex and run away, whereas before you had to dispel from the initial caster to get the +4 or the modifier in general. Now you can be within range of the vortex, but with only +1 or +2, you have to beat the minimum casting cost of the spell. That can make some of the spells like tree singing not as good because they have a minimum value that's very low. But some of the other ones that are very high, like the aforementioned Crystal Column on a 10, means that your total needs to be 11 to dispel it. So you're going to need, even with the very good dispeller, need a 9 to add 2 to get rid of the Crystal Column. So I think one of the sneaky things are that vortexes are back, and I guess that's what today's about. It's not just that they're back, it's that, yep, they can have really good effects in the game. So typically, a vortex can, the ones that move tend to deal damage, and the ones that don't tend to block line of sight. And the ones that do can deal damage, but then they typically create, all vortexes seem to create dangerous or difficult terrain as well around it with other types of effects. So the reality is that the initial placement is going to matter, and you might say, well, then they've got to get lucky. That's sort of true. And with good placement, you can sort of get lucky half the time, really, and have the vortex touch the unit and then take the quickest route out. Sometimes that can be, if it's only going in 1 inch straight back out in front, which is a nightmare for your opponent. Underneath that, you could look at, it's not just that they're then half, but there are other types of or other directions in which the vortex could go, which it goes before the opponent gets a chance to dispel, that'll start to interrupt play over the next few turns. So this isn't, we like to on this channel base our or what we talk about on real games and not just theory. And in this sense, I didn't think vortexes were going to be that much better. I was desperate to play Drain Magic, which was now hard to dispel, and that's good. But in the 3 games I've played so far of 1.5, vortexes have been good as well. So before we have a look at that, I just want to thank our major sponsor, Pandemwargaming. We've put an affiliate link in the description. We get a kickback from that if you go and buy from Jeff. He's making terrain and bases specifically, printing in high quality. What I've been able to do with his products, I think if we look, don't sue me, but here's a Graveguard model that we used base toppers for this time. So Charlie Factory, I've used their products before with resin where it was the whole base. Jeff has printed me some base toppers this time around for me to glue into pre-existing bases I already had, saving me a bit of money. And you'll probably see my Undead Army or Vampire Counts Army in the next month or so on this channel. I've given in and I'm going to be playing them at the next event that I play at. On top of that, Jeff is always able to look at other sorts of custom designs you might make. It's not just for Old World, but probably Age of Sigmar and other war games that you might want to have terrain built for, especially if you know what you're after. Beyond that, we are always grateful to all of the paid supporters of the channel. We're going to look into me getting some awesome microphone soon, and that's because people have thrown in a couple of bucks to make that happen. So I think if you listen to the last couple of videos, the audio comes in and out for me, and it's time to upgrade. We've made other improvements throughout. We really appreciate what people are able to help us do, and this video is one of the things that we've come to after the demand that comes through the feedback that you can give us on the YouTube channel or in our Discord. So, getting back to it, Paddy and I played Demons of Chaos versus Nomadic War. And of course, there'll be a battle rep down the line coming up. But I'm playing Demons. Paddy's playing Nomadic War. He has a level 3 Goblin odd boy, Odget, whatever they're called, running around on a horse. It was unstoppable the entire game, and there'll be more on that later. But I had started with my three juggernauts or blood crushers, trying to take them around the side of this forest on the rightmost flank of the board. He had his boar boys out on that flank. We were playing the one with three secondary objectives. I think it might be called a chance encounter, perhaps. Maybe it's called something else. And his boar boys were going to have to come through or not take the objective. So I thought, oh, here's a chance. I'll get the juggernauts behind this forest and cut back across once I'm around it. So even though he did bring his giant across, this is what happened. On the first turn, I've marched them. Next turn, I'm thinking, oh, I'll just straighten them up, march in another 14 inches, and I should then be able to cut across the field. He cast Foot of Gork, 15-inch range, which is another thing to talk about, how that is really important, how far you can throw these vortexes. You're not 15 inches is quite a lot for a vortex. They tend to be of shorter range. And he's able to put it right up against me. So if I'm going to want to move, I'm going to have to move through it. And what you would say is probably has this 50% chance of cutting through my unit with any arrow pointing in its bottom half, I believe, is going to cut through my unit. So that's what it did. He rolled it up and it rolled through my unit. And it was brutal. It's strength 5 hits. There's a bit of AP. Unfortunately, tonight was not rolling well on my saves at all. And he ended up doing 3 wounds, which is not unreasonable anyway, killing one of the blood crushers. So this took a lot of the steam out of my push. 3 of them might have been able to take it to a giant, maybe. But 2 of them definitely were not going to. And what's happened then is if I do nothing, I can continue to go forward to the giant, but otherwise it could cut back through me, or I could come around and I'm going to be out of trouble, but I get hit at the top. So the Foot of God also then created this impediment to me being able to come back around, which is what I sort of had to do. I had to decide. Luckily for me, I was not able to dispel it either, I should add, so I couldn't roll the 10 on the next turn to get rid of it. And what I did was I turned my blood crushers around to go in a different direction. So in this case, you can see that it's moved a bit to the left. So he had another turn where it could have bounced back over me, perhaps doing more wounds, killing another guy, but turned it to its left on our screen. And that's created this impediment here with the forest and the vortex that I've had to go around. So I've lost a guy and I lost a lot of time and I've abandoned my plan A from using this vortex altogether. He got it off on turn 1 pretty easily, and then for me it was difficult to dispel. I'm not sure if I ever dispelled it while it was in play, and I had multiple level 3s in my list. So that's one example of a spell that was probably not played or people did not want at all in the last format, and now it did quite well in this game all over. And there were plenty of times where I went to just pick it up and recast it because it was causing me so much trouble. So beyond that, I also had Crystal Column up. So I am running a Keeper of Secrets as my general. In the leftmost image, you can see the Keepers on the far left and the Steeds of Slaanesh at the bottom. And Paddy has his Wyvern, Tank Wyvern, Armor of Meteoric Iron, Trollhide Trousers, and Talisman of Protection at the top. So very difficult to kill. We play with the impassable terrain. You can see that piece of tower that the we play with the little like terrain board so that you know where the limits of the terrain are that block line of sight, not the piece itself, just to avoid arguments. And I've been able to class Crystal Column on the first turn. So what I've done is I've set it, this is the middle of the board, and that's the middle objective. I have thrown it out, I've moved up, thrown it out there to block any shot of this wyvern coming around to attack me. Of course, the wyvern can fly over it, but I've set it up in a way that if it wants to fly, it's probably risking being charged next turn. So underneath that, I've been able to move my demonets to just touch the objective. If Paddy wants to hit into that space that may be slightly out of the charge range of the keeper, if that's what I want to do, those demonets are going to run around the other side with their insanely large movement. So that crystal column sit there, turn one. However, then on turn two, I've been able to, like you can see, I brought my Bloodthirster over. I'm wanting to get this combat here with the Wyvern with my Bloodthirster, not my Keeper. So Paddy's not able to dispel it. I'm able to move my Keeper into this little pocket created by the terrain and the column, knowing that I can just pick it up if I want on my turn before I declare charges. So what I'm able to say is, you don't know if I'm going to pick it up or not. If you maneuver in a way that's beneficial to me, I'm going to attack you. If you don't, I'm just going to stay behind here and keep casting spells for the moment and improve my position. So that's what happened on that second turn too. Paddy did bring his wyvern forward. He decided that it was worth the risk, even though I couldn't charge it, and he was able to line up a charge on the keeper. I moved my demonettes past it. Unfortunately, they were shot up by Ruby Ring, which we'll talk about in another episode. But you can see it's created a lot of problems for him. Later in the game, so the Wyvern, interestingly, beat the Bloodthirster, was able to charge the Bloodthirster on the following turn, and the battle report will show how that ended up. But the Keeper of Secrets, with some help from Spectral Doppelganger, was able to take out the Wyvern right after that, and then move forward. So what happens on the bottom is I've been able to chase a unit of Boar Boys that is down the bottom of the board. And because the keeper itself is quite good, movement 8, +1, movement 8 Swift Stride, +1 on charge, pursuit, it can project pretty strong threat range. But it had been stuck in that middle of the board dealing with the Wyvern, and Paddy's Giant had maneuvered back across the board. I can say with certainty that if the Crystal Column hadn't been there, he would have been able to possibly charge my keeper in the position that it had been in the turn before. But instead, he has to go round it, like I've had to go around the Fist of Gork. And with Crystal Column, it's impassable, so he has no choice. And it bought me a turn. They do end up in combat in the last round, and I won't spoil what happens here. But you can see that the Crystal Column, which he couldn't dispel throughout the game, was able to create a modifier on lots of different charge ranges and effects that were beneficial to me. So I think it's worth knowing how good vortexes now are, because in the past people wouldn't play them because the random direction meant that it would often move once and then just get dispelled before anything happened. Now, because they don't get dispelled, it's entirely likely that they could end up in a beneficial position, a random position. A lot of them don't affect friendly units. Anything that's adding difficult or dangerous terrain creates charge effects where they have to take the low dice. And I think people should take a second look at all of the vortexes to see even like something like Summon Elemental Spirit, which was getting a bad rap. If that's useful, then you're looking at 5 out of the 6 non-signature elementalism spells are probably pretty playable. So I'd go back and have another look. I've been really surprised at how effective vortexes have been in the games I've played so far in 1.5, and I think it's one of the big changes that could improve and definitely make the games that you play in this format a lot more fun. Thanks again for your time, guys. We'll see you soon.